As Tom was saying, welcome to Sky 2, the spiritual home of Sky News. This is a really apt location for this talk, because it was just up the stairs that the majority of the development work was done on this project. The current Sky News team sits just through that gap over there, and the ops guys sit just down the hall, so we're definitely in the right place. Cool. So before we get started, just a little bit about me. I'm Brendan Quigley. I'm a senior software engineer here at Sky, and also have done a stint as solutions architect for over a year. So just up front, I'll tell you that while this project was happening, I was a solutions architect. So I worked a lot on the kind of the architecture side of things, but that didn't stop me from getting my grubby paws into the code wherever I could. So all mistakes are mine, of course. Previously, worked at digital agency 9XB and holiday search engine iSlolly.com. Mainly interested in PHP, but also JavaScript, data, architecture, all kinds of things. And there's the obligatory Twitter and GitHub, where I've got a few little toys and projects. Okay, so this talk, what's it all about? I want to cover the migration of news.sky.com, which is the Sky News web front end, to our PHP-based platform. Okay, so there was a lot of other things that we did as part of that project. So there was also a whole slew of APIs that we migrated as well. While that's indispensable and really interesting work, I'll just try and focus on the website and the work that we did on that. Also, I guess, in parallel, I want to talk about how we've changed the way that we do PHP apps in our tribe here at Sky. All development houses have a big code base, some of which that you're really happy with, some of which you're not so happy with, and this project definitely represented a great opportunity for us to just to reevaluate how we were doing our apps and to have a fresh crack at it. Cool. Why? Okay, so why would we want to rebuild Sky News in PHP when it was a perfectly good Node.js app? So I guess it's a couple of questions here. Why would we want to rebuild it all? And if we do, why would we rebuild it? So why rebuild? The existing site, there was nothing wrong with it. It was award-winning and won awards for its for the product that it put out. Perfectly good. It was stable, as far as we know. So the fact that we wanted to rebuild it is in no way a reflection on the product that was there or the developers that built it. I guess the big issue we would have seen would have been the consolidation. So here we have two websites. We've got two sets of CMS, got two video publishing solutions, two tech stacks, two platforms. It's a kind of pattern forming there. Doesn't really make a lot of sense from a business point of view, so that's quite a large part of the rationale. Why us? Why did our team do it? So the team that it came into at the time was Digital Content Tribe here at Sky. So we have a proven record of serving content at scale. So our kind of flagship site, if you like, is skysports.com, which is largest sports portal certainly in the country, definitely taken on Europe. We serve tens of millions of unique visitors every month. So serving editorial content, particularly at scale, was nothing new to us. Again, on the theme of editorial, we already had lots of experience providing editorial support to journalists and other editorial staff. We have a squad just specialises in editorial ops and CMS. And we had a battle-hardened platform. So, over years, the platform had been honed, so it was particularly optimized for the kind of workloads that Sky Sports and also Sky News want to engage in. And as if we need any more reason, here are the two sites in question. Bearing in mind, we didn't change the appearance of Sky News, so this is pretty much how it looked beforehand. You only have to look at it to know that it could certainly benefit from some consolidation. And likewise, here's an article page. Again, you can see we've got headers, we've got ads, we've got headlines, pictures, text. We've got, other articles on the side. Kind of, it's a wonder we hadn't already built it. And smug little message at the bottom. This is kind of what we do, so that's the reason that we would take it on. So a little bit of context. At the time we took this on, which was back in mid-2015, Sky was undergoing a big migration of tech teams from Austerley up here to Leeds. And in case you need to know where we are, that's where we are there, in Leeds. That's where Austerley is. It's a leafy little suburb outside of the Heathrow flight path where you can almost reach the planes as they fly over. And in case you need to know what a migration looks like, it looks like that arrow there. So that's the people coming up all the way up to sunny Leeds. So we had tribes springing up. A couple of years ago we had digital trading come up. We had online service, digital engagement, and as we see here, we ourselves, who were Sky Sports Digital Media, became the digital content tribe. So instead of just focusing on sports, we're now going to focus on news as well, and mobile. So, we're going to build Sky News. First steps, have a very, very, very simplified look at our architecture. Anyone who knows it will know that that's about as simplified as you can make it. So, this is for delivering web content for Sky Sports. Essentially, we have Sky Sports over here on the right. There's PHP front end. We've got an API in the middle, Java-based, backing onto a big Oracle database, and a CMS also written in PHP that interacts with that. So I think it was almost a no-brainer that we leverage all that existing stuff and build Sky News to work in much the same way. So at the outset, we wanted to identify some issues we had with our existing code base. So we do have a bespoke framework for Sky Sports, but given we had this opportunity to redo stuff from scratch, if you like, we thought it best not to just build on top of that. It's been around for a very long time, and like it or not, like all large-scale code bases, it had its baggage, and we thought now would be a good opportunity to actually examine that and see what we could do with it. We also had a very large monolithic PHP shared library, which sits behind a lot of the PHP sites, or sat behind a lot of the PHP sites that we were doing. It was, again, large scale, quite hard to test, and quite old in places. So we definitely wanted to get away from that. And then, to a sort of lesser extent, we had a monolithic front-end library, which was much newer, but again, we identified that this isn't how we would want to do things if we could start from scratch. So we had these three issues that we wanted to deal with. So if we look at the framework first, we hired in these cartoon people to come and explain to us what the differences between all these things were. Well, not really. These are us. We sat around. We had criteria that we wanted to measure each of these against, had to play with them, wrote some proof of concepts and whatnot. And in the end, Symfony came out as our choice. Some of the reasons were documentation, online resources were pretty good for Symfony. So, not saying that the rest weren't good, but we were struck by the amount of resources we could leverage. developer market for Symfony seemed to be very positive. At the time we were doing this, we were doing quite a lot of recruitment, so we were having a lot of CVs come across our desks, and what we were seeing was a lot of Symfony expertise, which again, going back to our bespoke framework, I would have been frankly astounded if somebody had rocked up with expertise in our bespoke framework, so that was definitely a factor. And again, features, I think everyone could agree that Symfony is a pretty solid framework. No matter what your preference is, it has everything in there that you'd expect from a modern MVC framework. And we would go on to rely on that stuff a lot. So, wiring up of services, using stuff like pre-render kernel event hooks, event listeners. Yep, a lot of the stuff that Symfony gives you out of the box, we were going to use. However, while it is an important choice, we didn't want to get tied in to a particular framework, not extremely tightly. We didn't want, having made this decision, to, for it to be following us around for years and years. So that led us to tackle the second part of our problem, our big legacy shared code base. We came up with the concept of packages, which, if you work down, there's a few people here who work in our tribe, this is now indelibly burnt into your mind. We won't win any prizes for naming things, that is a given, but packages for us is a concept that we needed to bring in order just to get away from this big monolith. So we would create these libraries for all these different things, nice and isolated, greenfield and testable. And what are the packages? Essentially PHP libraries. So they're composer based. So we have all that juicy dependency management done for us. We certainly weren't going to reinvent that. We have them semantically versioned, again, so that, consumers downstream can pull updates in from these different packages and be assured that it isn't going to break their code. Framework agnostic, again, going back to not trying to get tied into certain frameworks. We wanted to keep these packages, be they dealing with editorial, APIs, caches, whatever it may be. We didn't want to have sort of idiomatic Symfony constructs in there or anything else. So if we did want to use them in just pure PHP or in some other kind of framework, we could do. A good acid test of this is a lot of the packages that we developed are used by the legacy bespoke frameworks. So I think we've achieved that. I say mostly agnostic, and that's because, we have a number of Symfony apps, so it makes sense to create packages that implement bundles that can be shared. So, we will have a package bundle, which is a big library of optional services that you can just pull into your Symfony app. So, for the most part, framework agnostic, but not when it didn't make sense. Again, focus on quality and test coverage. So this is a brand new greenfield project. There's no reason that it shouldn't have top test coverage and have really high quality. I think it's all too easy with when you're working on legacy code bases to kind of look at some code and go, well, this is how they've done it here, so that must be the right way, and proceed in that vein. This was a great opportunity for us to set a high standard from the outset, so that's something we definitely wanted to achieve. We also had this idea that there'd be shared ownership. So even though I think it was like the new squad started work on the packages, very soon other squads in sports would be creating their own sport-based packages, or making changes in the core editorials or API packages. There's very much a sense that the packages are shared in the tribe, and to be honest, beyond, if anyone wants to use them within Sky. It's kind of that internal open source model, We have a very active Slack channel, which deals just with people proposing and discussing changes into the packages, and quite often impromptu groups of people will get together to discuss, a major change. We also wanted to standardize, so PSR2, which is fairly standard, and other PSRs where it made sense. So one of the things, interesting story, say PSR6 for caching. Actually, when we wanted to implement a package cache, it just so happened in that sprint that I started thinking, surely there's a PSR for caching, and I had been very negligent in my following of the FIG, and just Googled it, and they were voting on it that day. So I ended up spending quite a frantic afternoon just going, come on, please vote, get it through. And they did. Hey. So we use PSR6 for caching. And as I say, other PSRs as well. We wanted to have predictable code layout and idioms. Don't know if idioms is a word, but there it is. So we have the concept of entities for our domain models, and we have mappers in the kind of Martin Fowler data mapper sense, where you can interact with an API and get entities back. We have hydrators, which are used by these mappers, which will take raw data and format them into entities for you. Transformers, which kind of go the opposite way. Give it a bunch of entities and it'll give you back template data or XML feed data, whatever it is you happen to need. So, that's looking pretty good. We've got our back-end PHP packages together. What do we need next? Skeleton base. So another thing we needed was some kind of common base that we could build off. We wanted mess detector, code sniffer, copy and paste detector, PHP unit, all the stuff that you'd expect to see in a well-maintained modern library. We also have a shared Ant script, which you can run to get all your static analysis. And then more lately, we've implemented build pipelines for these in GitLab CI. So anytime anyone needs to create a new package, and they do get created still every now and again, you can just base off the skeleton, and you've got yourself a nice foundation to build off. Okay. So that's the back end. The front end is a little bit similar, and that's why the slide looks a bit similar. So while we had that ecosystem sorted out, we wanted to improve the front end, make it a bit more modular, a bit more testable, a bit more composable. So we have a whole bunch of front end components. So you'll probably see a bit of mirroring here between the back end and the front end, which is, I guess, because they have a very similar design objective. So, like the back end is composer based, front end is NPM based. These are NPM packages essentially. And an interesting point is during the build, Composer actually triggers our NPM installs. So we have a single install which installs the back end and the front end. Like the back end, front end is semantically versioned. Again, allowing people to update in safety, but also allowing them to pin to versions if they don't want to change the front end. It was very important to us that the front end be language agnostic. There's no reason at all that our front end should be tied to PHP in any way, which part of the reason why it's NPM based, but also some of the other choices that we made, especially around templating language. A good example of this is, the header and footer that you see on Sky News is exactly the same code and components that you see on the election site, which actually is a Node.js site. So, and if we wanted to, write something in Ruby or in any other language, we'd have a pretty good head start on the UI components that we've got. So again, common file and directory structure. And this is mainly so that our build tools will know where to find the templates in order to symlink them for Symfony and whatever other framework we want to use, and also so that the build can find the various styles and scripts to package those up and process them. So the actual UI components themselves, they comprise one or more of a template which uses handlebars. So I guess to some people it might seem like a strange choice to use handlebars, but again, like we say above, we were going for language agnostic. So instead of using Twig or something like that, which would be more natural in Symfony, handlebars was the choice. I think at the time we looked into it, and it had probably one of the best support in libraries among different languages. So yeah, using handlebars. You might have some styles. So we started off using PostCSS, more latterly switching to Sass in order to align more with some other kind of component and UI initiatives that were going on across Sky. And script. So you can see that some of your components might have all of these. Some kind of interactive component. Some might literally only be a template with a little bit of style. Excuse me. Some might just be including a script that gets run in a non-visual way. Okay. So here's some in action. Here's Johnny Depp. Doesn't he look mean? He looks pretty mean. And I wish I could play that video. Who's seen that video? It's one of the finest videos known to humanity, right? I don't even know why I'm doing this talk. We should just be watching Johnny Depp's video. But I included, to be honest with you, I was going through just looking for a page, and I think he genuinely looks so mean that I had to include that picture. You certainly wouldn't want that guy bringing a terrier into your country. But, so, here's the components in action. So virtually everything you see on the site is a shared component. So we've got our header, and you can imagine there's a complementary footer somewhere. We've got our MPUs for advertising. We've got an article header there, which you can imagine you might want to use independently for some reason. Got images, video components, share links, body. We've got these the story grid on the side, which again is reused throughout the site, used for the index pages. So that gives you some idea of the amount of usage that we're putting these components to, and it's certainly what we'd be seeing on all the newer sports builds as well. Okay. So just want to say a word on handlebars and the performance, because when we started off, we were using the Xamarin handlebars library, which was cool, and I think we started using it because it provided some really, really useful helpers, like the block helper and the override helper, which make building layouts really, really simple and not a chore at all. The only thing was, though, that it was slow. It was really slow, and we kind of knew this all along. We're like, this is slow, but MVC being what it is, we thought, well, we know there are faster libraries out there, so when the time comes, we'll just drop it in, and everything will be fine. And eventually we did. We came across Light and Candy, which is a great library, but doesn't support the really useful Xamarin helpers that we'd been relying on. So I'll say we had to write preprocessors. A guy called Steve Jordan had to write preprocessors for all these things, and did a bang-up job on it. Certainly wasn't a job I envied him, but yep, he did it. And on the absolute upside, that library is very, very fast. So we immediately saw huge improvements in page generation time, render time. It's an interesting library, Light and Candy. Might be some of the oddest code you ever see, but it's definitely performant. It's definitely very, very fast. It works by kind of pre-generating PHP-based templates and then caching those. Very cool. Okay, so at this point, we had a build. We'd solved our 3 issues that we were trying to address with our framework and our back-end libraries and our front-end libraries. We'd been through load test, we'd been through pen tests, we'd had sign off. We were approaching the inevitable launch, and which is always an exciting time in any project, especially one as large scale as the Sky News migration, which at this point now had been going for just under a year. So I think we began in kind of late summer 2015, and we were now heading for July last year. So we're actually coming. It just occurred to me actually earlier that we're coming up to its first birthday, so we're going to have to get a cake. So anywho, so the launch. I've skimmed over quite a lot of work that happened. It sounds like, oh, we just made some PHP libraries and we just made some front-end components, but there was a lot of work went into the migration. Not all of it in PHP. So this part of it here, the data migration and backfill, as I mentioned before, we had 2 CMSs, 2 backend storages, 2 everything, 2 sets of everything. And we had to get the data from there into our systems. And that, as you can see, was quite a bit of work. We had 170,000 articles. We had something like 75,000 video media items to ingest, and 190,000 image media items. And as you can imagine, bang, they didn't just like decide to play nicely and line up. There was quite a lot of transformation had to happen, and all that work was done in Python, which is what we tend to do most of our processing and feeds kind of work in. And and again paved the way, like so much of the Sky News work, for some really useful tools which we've gone on to use since. Of course, it wasn't just us lowly devs and tech people who had big changes afoot. The news guys, the news editors and journalists, they had to undergo some serious reconfiguration. They loved their CMS, their beloved CMS, and why wouldn't they? They'd been using it, they'd got used to its foibles, and they'd found its workarounds, and they'd had it built just for them. So took a little bit of work to get those guys onto our CMS, which, to be fair, the sports journalists had been loving for quite a long time. At least we think they have, and the feedback's been good. So they had to be trained and had to ensure that they were happy enough with the migration as well before we could do anything. And then there's a few things I haven't really touched on. Big bang versus phased. So this is a question that you always want to ask yourself when you're going to do a rebuild of something. Do we build the whole thing and then boom, release it, or do we release it bit by bit? In this case, given that while Sky News is it's a pretty large scale project, at the end of the day, it still is a site which has article pages, a few different types, and a number of news indexes. It's not on the same sort of complexity scale as something like Sky Sports or something like, some of the other kind of large scale sites that are out there. So that was one of the reasons we decided to go big bang. I guess the other reason was we weren't changing how it looked drastically. So, if everything went wrong, there was quite a clear rollback procedure. Just roll back, just switch back to using the other one. So big bang made a lot of sense. So got it running in prod for a few days before go live, just to iron out any last minute kinks and make sure everything's running nicely. Then on the fateful day, because it's behind the CDN, just the ops guys back there, switch the origins, point at our platform instead of the existing platform. Then you hold your breath, and then nobody noticed. Well, we noticed. We noticed because we started to look at the stats and we started to look at, is it performing? Is it holding up to load? And again, smug face, yeah, it did, and we were pretty happy with it. So that happened on 7th of July, and yeah, I'd love to tell you that there was, alarm bells and there was all kinds of things, but it genuinely went quite smoothly, and we were very pleased all around. So post-launch, stable and performant. I really, when I looked at that, I thought strong and stable, but you can't You can't say that anymore. It's not good. Sky News has had days where it's had insane traffic, which is an interesting thing in itself. I mean, in our tribe, we come from a background where we have sports products, which to a large extent have fairly predictable traffic patterns. You know that 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, boom, it's going to happen every week. Well, every week that the football season is on anyway. You know when boxing matches are happening. You can pretty much tell when your peak's going to be. Like our biggest day tends to be transfer deadline day. You know when that's going to happen, and great. News, on the other hand, you very, very, very rarely know when anything's going to happen, and it's in the nearly a year it's been up there. Quite a few, sad to say, bad things have happened, which have generated, immense amounts of pressure on the site and load. But it's stood up admirably, and we're very, very happy with it. The approach overall has been validated, which is great news, because it would have been pretty bad if it hadn't. The idea of us using, smaller, more composable PHP packages, and likewise UI components as opposed to just monolithic builds, is working out quite well, and it's the approach that we now use. As we see here, we've got great reusability with the PHP packages and the components. Like, genuinely, the components that you're seeing on the Johnny Depp page, a lot of those are being used on sports right now, and in upcoming sports projects. So, the whole approach is what we're using across the tribe for all our PHP stuff. Some really exciting developments coming with Sports UK, Sports Germany, which who knows, there might be a talk about sometime in the future. But of course, that's all a different story. So that is how we migrated Sky News from Node.js to PHP. I think it's a great success story for PHP. When people tell you that, PHP is old, it's dead in the water, Node's cool, Node's new. Yeah, that's half true. The second half is true. The first half isn't. And as we've shown, you can, easily, maybe not, but you can certainly build a high-profile, high-scale site with PHP where once Node would have been the choice. So, thank you. So, are there any nice questions? I won't be able to see your hand if you're putting it up. You'll have to shout out. No. Yeah, I think a lot of it was based on the idea that we had a very large PHP skill set, and quite a few years of experience with PHP, and also I think the idea was that by doing news in PHP, we could pave the way to do our other sports projects in PHP as well. I think for various reasons we're definitely a PHP house, and that's kind of, it's been challenged over the years. We are the only tribe in Sky that certainly uses PHP as its main language. I'm not really aware of any other tribes apart from maybe some of the internal agency stuff that does. But we've always been able to make the case that the developer market is there. And of course, when considering stuff like performance and what have you, at this point, PHP 7 was in the ascent, it was ready to go. And I distinctly remember having the conversation around, well, if we choose something like Symfony and, PHP, it's not known for its like light-footedness. Maybe we're going to struggle. But again, we were confident that we would get performance gains with PHP 7 and what have you. So, I don't think we certainly didn't consider, let's keep it in Node.js. I think the idea was always to try and unify the platform. And given that our platform was the kind of more mature and the more stable, well, not saying more stable, that's unfair. Certainly the more mature and the one that had the greater support and was undergoing the greatest amount of traffic and whatnot. That was the choice we made. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think it was a lot of it was, performance was definitely a factor, but a bigger factor, and I think something that probably influences cost a lot more is the ease of development. And I think that was certainly a big factor in why we chose something like Symfony, and even PHP. Again, we just found that it was very easy to recruit for, very easy to get people upskilled into, and people just found it easier to develop against. But in terms of like raw speed tests, not particularly. I think we would validate that, look, this isn't going to absolutely bomb. We're going to be okay. We did have some concerns when we were using Xamarin as the handlebars library, but beyond that, we were pretty confident that having tested Light and Candy in isolation, we can drop that in and it's going to be fine. But we were certainly very pro PHP. Always have been. Always will be. Yeah. You can. That's good. You can always ask me in the pub later. So, all right. Thanks again.